Friends and patriots, welcome and good evening to you. My name is Ajuri Ngelale, and I come to you from the nation's capital. This is Eagle Eye. On this edition of the program, we continue our insightful look at developments inside the 9th National Assembly with this conclusive part 2 of our wide-ranging and exclusive conversation with the chairman of the 9th National Assembly and president of the 9th Nigerian Senate, Dr. Ahmad Ibrahim Lawan. Without further ado, let's head back to the National Assembly. After a long morning of meetings and several more hours spent in serious plenary deliberations on issues confronting the nation, it is now 2 p.m., the end time for sitting. Heading back to the office with mace in front, the Senate President takes stock of this moment in history that has brought him and President Muhammadu Buhari into crossing paths.
Your Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari has always been something of a paradigm shifter. You would recall that during the era that he was previously serving as head of state, he came in at a time when a fairly ostentatious political elite had brought in economic decline to the country. He now instilled the war on indiscipline. And of course, we all know where we were in 2015 with some of the challenges then. He has now come again. What do you make of the dynamic that exists now between President Muhammadu Buhari's leadership and what you are trying to do under the 9th National Assembly to try and break jinxes across sectors with legislative interventions across important economic sectors of the country?
First of all, President Muhammadu Buhari had a debt with history when he became the head of state. Nigeria was then facing some very specific and very unique challenges of development and nationhood. And he had to introduce some measures, including the war against indiscipline, just to reorientate Nigerians to respect their country, to respect and honor each other, and of course work for the development of the nation. In 2015, Nigerians in their majority saw a need to vote for President Muhammadu Buhari to be president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, making him a leader of the country in a different way. And of course, the challenges were obvious. We had challenges of insecurity, especially the insurgency in the Northeast. The economy was going down, and some other issues that were militating against the development of our country. And therefore, he has that debt with history, again, as a civilian or a democratically elected president. Of course, he did impressively well, even though there were some encumbrances in the operations of the government. But in the first tenure, but I think Nigerians saw the potential from what was achieved despite the hindrances that there were in the first tenure, and they voted for him in 2019 again because they believe that the situation would be better, the challenges could be addressed in a better way from 2019 to 2023. And I'm happy, I'm pleased to say that the performance of this administration has improved significantly from 2019, and that is the kind of hope and expectation Nigerians had for voting him again in 2019.
Decades-long collusion between executive and legislative officials and oil companies deprived Nigeria of over $40 billion since 2000, a trend the Senate president determined would be a legacy to break.
We all know how the oil industry, the oil and gas industry, has been suffering from lack of any significant and reasonable investments due to any legal framework that investors could use to feel invited and assured for them to put their money. And therefore, in 2019, immediately after the president was voted in for the second time, the issue of the passage or the consideration of the PIB, Petroleum Industry Bill, came up again. It was considered in the Eighth Assembly in 2016, but then that was the effort of the Parliament. It didn't come from the bills then, did not come from the executive side of government. But the 2019 bill was a product of some serious engagement and synergy and partnership between the two arms of government. And I would at this point say that when we came in, the Ninth National Assembly, and by the grace of God, when we emerged leaders, the petrol industry bill was on top of our priorities in both chambers, in the legislative agendas of the two chambers. And we also decided that we'll go in a different way. We will not follow or toe the line of the previous efforts from the Sixth Assembly in 2008, when the government of the late Umar Musa Yar'Adua of blessed memory presented the bill in the first place. So we decided from the scratch we'll start engagement between the two arms of government, lest our oil and gas related committees be working with executive arm of government, the agencies that are responsible, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the NNPC, the DPR then, and PTDF, and so on and so forth, should start working with our committees on petroleum resources upstream, our committee on petroleum resources downstream, our committee on gas from both chambers. And that was what happened. All through the initial exploratory processes, our committees were engaged in the activities of coming up with a framework of this bill with the other side of government. And by the time the bill was sent to the National Assembly officially, most of what was there were known to us, even though we still had to amend some parts, or maybe advise that the executive arm of government should look into some parts again before we took a final decision on consideration and passage. But it was very minimal because the engagements that we had was deep and expansive, and we believe that that was the way to go, and it went well. Of course, the rest they say is history. We passed the petrol industry bill. Within 6-7 months of its coming into the National Assembly, and by the grace of God, the President assented to it, and those devils that were making it difficult or impossible for the PIB to be passed, or when passed, not to be assented to, were defeated. And today, I'm happy to say that we are already seeing the scenario of getting more investments into the petroleum, oil and gas industry in Nigeria.
While current production stands at 1.4 million barrels per day, with pipeline vandalism, crude theft, and points of moribund commodity transport systems failing, Nigeria has unfulfilled capacity to presently produce 2.3 million barrels today. The Post-Petroleum Industry Act outlook promises so much more, with President Muhammadu Buhari's 4 million barrels per day target for this decade now supported by upcoming final investment decisions on 7 major deep offshore projects totaling a massive 875,000 barrels per day. With fiscal and regulatory frameworks set following the ascent of the Petroleum Industry Act, newfound predictability for investors mean greater investments leading to significantly enhanced revenues for the nation.
Only last week, the managing director, the GMD of NNPC Limited, was saying they're accessing $5 billion investment. And that's the kind of thing that we lacked for over 20 years. Now we will have more resources flowing into our country, into this industry. But the impact will be so expansive, this parallel economic and social impacts will be so much for our country in a very positive way. People will have more funds in the banks. They can also go and tap into the resources that will be in our banks, and the oil and gas industry in Nigeria will now pick up. And we pray that in the next few years, probably 3-4 years, there will be a lot of economic impacts in a very positive way because of the passage of the petrol industry bill. But even before the petrol industry bill was passed, we had a test of what it was going to be like in terms of benefits. We passed the deep offshore production sharing contract, and that was one amendment that should have been carried out well before then. It too was delayed for over 20 years, and Nigeria was losing so much resources. We were then at the point before the amendment was done, Nigeria was only benefiting from $216 million as a result of lack of amendment to the law. By the time we amended the law, and of course the necessary regulations and guidelines came up, Nigeria would start benefiting close to $2 billion instead of the $216 million. And at this point in our country, $2 billion is something. It's a big deal. And I believe that that services our economy is an injection. It's a desirable injection into our economy. And of course, with the Petroleum Industry Act now in place, it's going to be a revolution that will bring a lot of investments into the oil and gas industry, a revolution that will energize the economy as a whole.
Your Excellency, you've touched on so much in terms of the oil and gas sector, but many of the other economic reform measures that really could not have scaled through if not for the intervention of the Ninth National Assembly really were the kind of reforms we saw around the calibration done to the nation's tax code with consecutive now finance bills. What would you tell Nigerians about the role that these financial reform packages that you've passed into law, what role are they now playing in terms of reforming the economy and making it more inclusive?
Well, sometimes an economy could grow without necessarily being inclusive. And the desire of this administration, which the parliament is part, is to have an economy that grows and is an all-inclusive economic growth and development. So, and it's a novel thing that the Ministry of Finance in this administration started to bring amendments into the finance bill. And what we have done so far, and the last finance bill we passed was for 2022, that we were passed, and is to really give exempts and incentives to SMEs, and of course those people at the lowest level of the ladder. But of course that is not to say that those who are up there are overtaxed inappropriately. There's no such thing as overtaxing anybody, but it's giving an economic incentive to industries, to especially the medium, small scale and medium scale industries that will bring more opportunities for employment and wealth creation for our people. So we have done that much, but there is something that we are also doing as a result of the amendment to the Finance Act of 2022. And that is getting more and more revenues from the independent sources, and also getting more and more revenues from the government-owned enterprises. You recall that on Monday, we had a meeting of all the revenue-generating agencies in the National Assembly. The Senate leadership body of principal officers and the committee of the Senate on Finance had an engagement with all the revenue-generating agencies. And the idea is we want our revenue-generating agencies to meet their targets. In fact, in some cases, we redefine the targets in the budget, especially the budget and the MTEF. We redefine the targets for some because we believe that they can do better, and giving them the kind of targets initially given, we thought was not to get the best out of them. So we are now going to have regular quarterly meeting with all the revenue generating agencies in order to be reviewing their performances, how they have been able to achieve the targets set for them. If they are not able to, why have they not been able to? If there are some hindrances and hurdles and encumbrances, then it is for us to quickly come in and work out ways and means of freeing the agencies from those encumbrances so that they are able to meet the targets. But I believe that what we are about to do is to bring in more revenues into the coffers of government through this amendment to the Finance Act, and also working with those agencies of government that are in charge of revenue generation. We are expecting 1.26 or 1.3 trillion from the independent revenue sources. But my belief is, as an individual, as a member of the National Assembly, we can do far better than that. In fact, I'm of the opinion, and I have some information. I'm of the opinion that the internally generated revenues from independent sources, the revenues from the government-owned enterprises, we can generate more than 3 trillion or about 3 trillion naira. It is essential, it is imperative, it is necessary that we work hard to generate more revenues, because what we achieve in terms of revenue to GDP is so abysmal. It's just about 5-6%. Other countries approach maybe 26, 25, and that percent, and that is the kind of thing that will help you really generate revenue, that will help your country grow. And in the absence of getting more revenues, we would have no option but to either maybe close shop, which is not an option. Revenue, we take some borrow funds, which if you have to, if you must do so responsibly. And when I say responsibly, I mean you must clearly define, spot on, what you are using these loans or borrowed funds for, and you stick with that. And the other sources of dealing with this kind of situation where you don't have enough revenues is maybe go for the private-public partnership, the BOT, the bill operate transfer, and so on and so forth, just to minimize borrowing, because at the moment, the level of our borrowing is still sustainable, but it takes and eats deep into the revenues that we generate. And it's not too good for us. So we, in the Senate, we're emphasizing on generating more revenues internally, because we still have a lot of opportunities out there. And if we optimize the processes of generating and collecting revenues, we can achieve, one, getting more revenues, two, reducing our borrowing level, and of course, by so doing, the revenues can now be applied for national development.
Your Excellency, you've discussed the issue of insecurity quite a bit, the various sub-segments of it, whether it's mandatory, whether it's kidnapping, whether it's insurgency, and the like. What is it that Nigerians should know about what the Ninth National Assembly is doing or is prepared to do to assist the executive to fundamentally and comprehensively deal with these issues once and for all?
The National Assembly had taken the step to ensure that every time there was any request for funds for the security agencies, we support that kind of initiative. There was hardly a day that would come and pass in the legislative week, as far as I can remember, in this 9th National Assembly, that one issue of insecurity or the other would not be discussed in the Senate. Hardly a day will pass. In the 2022 appropriation, the security agencies and armed forces in the main appropriation would have nothing less than 1 trillion naira. And that is an approval by the National Assembly. And that is to tell you that as far as we are concerned, there is no investment that is much more important than investing in the security of lives and property of the people of this country. And of course, you recall that the Police Trust Fund is, as an act now, the Police Trust Fund would be available to the police force that needs it to do their recruitments, to do the other things that we need for effective and efficient policing. And the Police Act that we also passed to reform the police for it to ensure that there is training, there is retraining, considering their welfare, and of course, giving them the kind of weapons that they need. So this 9th National Assembly has not stopped at anything and will not stop at anything to support the executive arm of government to fight insecurity in the country. And by the way, let me express profound optimism that this administration, President Muhammadu Buhari, has been doing so well. He has been devoting so much resources into the security of this country. What we are now expecting is for our security agencies to reciprocate. We need to get the kind of outcome that we have invested in, and I must commend the legislature, the 9th National Assembly, and the executive arm of government led by the President Muhammadu Buhari, for working so hard. The other segment is to gain or regain the confidence of Nigerians. Citizens are supposed to say something when they see something, but we need to encourage the citizens to do that. So there is need for us in leadership position, and especially those given the responsibility to reorientate society and our people, to reach out through whatever programs they need to make citizens part and parcel of the fight against insecurity in the country.
After spending time with colleagues in the post-plenary period, the Senate President makes his way up flights to the new office. It is here that we engage him in the corridors.
Your Excellency, as the Chairman of the National Assembly and as the President of the 9th Nigerian Senate, you've always said that your leadership role is that of being a first among equals. Can you just inform Nigerians about that process of consensus gathering and consultation with your colleagues that allows you to build the relationships outside of the chamber that impact on your ability to deliver inside of the chamber?
Well, thank you very much. You know, legislators are members of a community of their own. We, distinguished senators, 109 of us, are members of the Senate. We are friends, we are colleagues, we are brothers and sisters, and we all the time try to consider every single issue on the basis of the national interest and how we can aggregate our opinions and come up with a resolution that will be a consensus resolution that will be in the interest of Nigerians. And in the 9th Senate particularly, we've campaigned for the leadership of the Senate and indeed the National Assembly on the basis of working for a Senate that will work for Nigerians and our nation. And we have been able to achieve that because we have been operating a bipartisan Senate where our political platforms do not really matter much. What matters most to us is what will be in the interest of our people, in the interest of Nigerians, the citizens, in the interest of the nation. And so far, so good. Senators, distinguished senators of the 9th National Assembly have distinguished themselves so well. We have been very, very patriotic, very considerate, very responsible and responsive to all the issues that will make our country better. We have passed so many bills that have been signed into law that affect in very positive and progressive way the economy, particularly the oil and gas industry, the security environment, the electoral environment, particularly. We are still waiting for Mr. President to append his signature. But we have always come together, regardless of our political persuasions, regardless of our ethnic and religious backgrounds, to work for our people. And the glory be to God, because we have been able to do this for the last 2.5 years.
Elected by 79 out of 109 senators, the Senate President has entrusted an unprecedented number of important chairmanships to the opposition to build strategic consensus around the Buhari administration's development agenda.
If you want to achieve something great, especially in the parliament, you have to be able to build consensus. And the first effort you need to build consensus is to be sure that your political dispositions do not make you adverse in your judgments, that do not make you hostile to others because they hold different political opinions, but all the time maybe shifting grounds as a result of negotiations, consultations, and horse trading. And we have been able to achieve so much to the glory of God in the last 2.5 years. I can dare say that this 9th Senate has done so much in terms of legislations that we can say we are the Senate to beat, really, in the last 20 or so years in the history of the National Assembly.
Walking past this seal is a daily reminder that time in this hallowed office is limited, and the time to achieve great and lasting things is even more so. Now firmly seated in solace, these are the quiet hours in which paperwork gets done. A day in the life of the nation's number 3 citizen soon concludes, but the fight to build a better, more equitable country is just beginning. In our engagements with the President of the 9th Nigerian Senate, we are reminded that there is nothing naive or weak about working with those we have disagreements with in pursuit of causes larger than ourselves. In fact, it requires tremendous strength and self-discipline from each of us to break the cynical paradigms of antagonistic politics that have come to characterize our political culture at great expense to our national reputation around the world. Those rancid days when lawmakers physically brawled in the chambers and shouted insults at heads of state during globally televised addresses. We have now seen that not only is another way possible, but that united approaches are capable of producing results that empirically and by far surpass any ever produced by the hostile politics of narrow ambition, sentiment, and hyper-partisanship. Share your thoughts and constructive comments with us on the Eagle Eye Facebook and Instagram page. As I always do, I have enjoyed this time with you, and I thank you for your viewership. I look forward to your company as I host you once again next week at this same time on this network. Until next time, may God Almighty go with you, and as eagles, may we all soar and lift our nation high as we do.